are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how's it going today?
Busier than I
Did,
expected.
did anything exciting happen? Okay, obviously, if you're
Yeah, it was
listening to the
June
show,
23rd.
right, June 23rd in Flyers land, and June 23rd strikes again. And frankly, yeah, never mind. We'll get into that. We got a lot to go into today. Obviously, there's a big trade to talk about. We do have our draft preview here as well. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, I'm in my mobile setup here, but we're making it work because it's just too important. It's too big a day.
Mhm.
As we're diving into it, we do have follow us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Check us out on our YouTube channel. Take care of us over there. Hit the like button, subscribe, help us out, tell your friends, all that good stuff. So, okay, big news. Not gonna push it off any further. Not gonna. The lead story today is that Trevor Zegras, the man who Michigan's all the time, the cover of NHL 23, one of the biggest rising stars in the NHL a couple of years ago. Trevor Zegras is a Philadelphia Flyer. Kevin, immediate reaction upon hearing the news that Trevor Zegras is on the hockey team.
Well, it's significant because it's name recognition. You start there. It's very and like you get players like this. Like this is what you want to see this team do. You need to have something that gets people out of bed, so to speak. Like and it does. You know, Michkov was the first kind of step of that. And ironically enough, this is maybe the first June 23rd reference we're gonna make. That was when people kind of found out a year ago that Michkov is probably coming in some capacity, or it was at least more hinted at. Um, and now, now you get a trade like this. What I kind of kept saying about this, and you'll agree with this, is just go watch highlights for a little bit of Trevor
Please.
Zegras, and you get excited just about that alone, to start with. There are there's and Danny Briere said this yesterday when we had his media availability about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. um there is risk involved. There are certain things to go. He acknowledged there's risk. I don't think he acknowledged the risk to the level that there is with something like this, because but I think where I'm going with this is that he did say this is the reason he's available. A top six potential forward is not available just because. A top six forward is potentially available because there's a reason that there's a risk involved for the team acquiring equally.
Sure.
um but they needed high end talent, and this guy oozes high end talent. So it's obviously from the offensive side, that's where the risks come in. The risks come in are been injured a lot in the last 2 years, three pretty significant injuries. He missed a lot of time in 23-24. It was a groin injury, then he broke his ankle, and then he had a torn meniscus last year, and that helped him, miss another quarter plus of the season. And the numbers kind of reflected that from the injuries. Briere said there's nothing to worry about there. It's all been cleared. He's good. We fully expect him to be at full capability. Okay, that's good news on that front. There was his usage. He was like, everybody's going to jump and go, they got a center. That's great. Not quite yet. That's the hope, but he's been
Well,
used as a winger more.
yeah, and he's going to get tried at center, as Danny Briere mentioned, but it, it's a low risk move for Danny Briere, and we'll talk about the return here in a second. But uh, it's a low risk move for Danny Briere because this is a younger player who is on the last year of a contract that's paying him, what's that, 5.75.
Yes.
And yeah, he needs a contract. He's an RFA at the end of this year. He's playing through his bridge right now in a lot of ways, and he was hurt for a lot of his bridge. So his next contract is a little bit of a mystery. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason it's a low risk proposition is because of what you gave up for it. I think we should talk about the return here, and
Sure.
it's Ryan Poehling, one of your second round picks this year, 45th overall, and a fourth round pick in 2026. So we're talking about a guy who was in your bottom six and a really good center. I liked Ryan Poehling. He was a good asset for this team. You
Mm-hmm.
know, but I mean, there's rumors at the trade deadline that you could have gotten a mid round pick for him, and instead you hold on to him and flip him for Zegras. I mean, we'll talk about Danny Briere as the show goes on here, but with this one, you still have 6 picks in the first 2 rounds. You gave up a bottom 6 center for a guy who will probably end up on the wing, but you can at least try him at center in the meantime, and then a 4th round pick next year.
Well, think about something for a second. Okay, let's start with each kind of piece of this here, because I'll do the easy one first. A 2026 mid-round pick, you shouldn't even be thinking about those yet.
That's almost nothing.
It should be out of sight, out of mind what you think you're potentially giving up for it if you're getting something in return that feels like it could be top 6 material. That's an easy one. The 2025 second rounder that's 45th overall. You got these picks for this reason. This is why you built up all the draft capital, was if something presented itself. And Briere even said 3 first-rounders, they were all no-goes. That was not on the at least from the Flyers' perspective. That's probably where Anaheim wanted the discussion to start. But Briere was not giving up the 3 first-rounders because, let's face it, I think if you're moving anything, certainly 6, but 22 and 31 also, if you're moving any of the first-round picks, it's got to be for more of a sure thing than we're taking a chance that Zegras is the 60-plus point guy, not the guy who's been riddled by injuries for the last 2 years and doesn't look as much like the same player.
And we'll talk about the Briere media availability from Monday a little bit more later. But did you get the impression when he said that those first rounders were not in play for Zegras, did you get the impression that he was saying they're not in play because we're using them and we want players? Or did you get the impression that he was saying we're not using them for something like this, but we absolutely would use them for something like you just said there, a little bit more certain?
Well, I don't think it means that they're off the table. I think in this conversation they were, because it wasn't like, I wonder if the same thing would be said for Mason McTavish, for example. If your conversation centered around McTavish, not Zegras, would you say the same thing? Would you say, you might, now with McTavish, because there's no contract involved, you might say definitely not 6, but I'd be willing to part ways, instead of 45, I'm willing to go to 31 now, or 22 even, because that's a different story. There is no injury history with McTavish. There's,
he's going to be a wing.
Well, he's even more of a sure thing with this at the center position. Exactly. All these types of things. Maybe then you go there. I don't even think that's where it is at this point. I think it's just, that's not what they were moving it on. Like, think about it. This is a younger and cheaper acquisition than what the Flyers ultimately did several years back when they got Kevin Hayes. What did Kevin Hayes' rights cost you? It was a 5th-round pick. Just to get into the conversation a few days early, of which you had a contract done pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But my point with that is that you're not unless you get something that is so surefire, it's going to go straight. Like, doing that with Kevin Hayes was still a little bit of a reach to a degree, right? Like,
yeah,
you were still not sitting there going, well, that's the top line guy. You were sliding somebody behind, and granted, at the time you were doing all of that, Sean Couturier was at the top of his game, and you were like trying to do the pecking order. Now you don't really have much down the middle like that anymore. What this does to me is solidifies, at very least, if you're going to play him at center, at the very least, it solidifies him in the 2C slot. I don't know that he's 1C material yet. He's going to have to prove that he is, if that's where you want to go with this. But at the very least, it takes, like, I can see them moving forward now this season and saying Zegras is going to try center again, because that's what both he wants, and we've got to see if this works. And for right now, if you can put 2 really good wingers around Sean Couturier, you can play him top 6 minutes to get by until you find the next guy. And it puts Noah Cates on that nice 4x4 deal back into a 3C role that makes a lot more sense. And Briere even said, when it comes to the 4th line, could be internal, could be a cheap free agent, like, they'll explore all options. They've got internal. It's really funny because last week we talked about the possibility of them mostly running it back because it was, how are you going to find anybody down the middle that really kind of moves the needle? You're really not, right? Like we played the free agency game. It was kind of like there
Oh,
might be a
and
guy here or there, but like this moves the
we
needle in a totally different way.
well, exactly, and we speculated about moves like this, like going out and signing the third best free agent center is not going to get you to the playoffs. Is not going to turn your team around. You got to go out there, give up some assets, and pry away some young, talented players. And this is a little bit of a low risk move because he's coming off of 2 injury-prone seasons. But this is Danny Briere going out and getting a high potential player, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody talks about the last 2 years, and yes, they have been tough. They have been injury prone. The point production has not really been there, although it did rebound a little bit last year. And he's over half a point per game, even battling through some injuries and stuff. But the first 2 years, his first real 2 years in the NHL, 'cause, that
Oh
24
yeah,
game, extended cup of coffee. But his first 2 years, he played 75 games and had 61 points, 81 games and had 65 points as a 19, 20, 21 year old.
right.
And yes, you are playing the risk game because he's coming off some devastating injuries. I'm hoping, and obviously Danny Briere is
Mhm.
hoping too, that it's a string of bad luck, right? You got three probably semi-related, but not directly related injuries, right? Because
Mhm.
when it's lower body, everything affects everything. But
Well, to me, the ankle doesn't relate to the other two.
no,
A,
that's
a
valid.
groin
That's
a groin injury and a knee injury, and I'm not saying that like they're not direct same area of the body, but it's still, you undergo surgery for a torn meniscus. That's a problem. Like that's something. You break
in
your ankle,
hockey. Right.
but you break your ankle because you blocked a shot. You have to take a lot of time off,
That's just hockey.
but I
Yeah,
think but I think a lot of people come back from things like that. I
absolutely.
I think well, certainly the other piece of it you're hoping for is that, aside from the injuries, is the change of scenery aspect of this, because
Absolutely.
one, and we documented this because like, and it's kind of funny because like the joke I almost made in the group chat was like, yeah, because I brought up everybody hated Greg Cronin out there. Like Anaheim, the entire Anaheim roster seemed like was fed up with Cronin
Yeah,
being the
we
coach.
talked about it.
But the
Yeah,
funny part was, so I almost made the joke though that it was that was the easiest coach firing to predict going into this offseason. And Peter Laviolette and Mike Sullivan. Like there was kind of a lot of them that became
there's
easy
a
to
bunch of
predict by
them.
the like there was kind of a lot of them that became easy to predict by the end of it. But like what I'm getting at is that certainly that played a factor. There was also like that bridge deal that you're talking about that's on the last year. He held out for that. That was a big contract negotiation situation where he didn't show up to training camp right away, missed parts of the preseason that year. It was a lot. So and there's a knock on him a little bit as a player that he's all offense, you know, defense be damned, right? Like I don't back check, I don't do this, I don't do, and maybe that's changing him. Maybe that has to do with I didn't want to play wing and the coach won't play me at center because by that point, like and think about it. Who do the Ducks have that, yeah, because obviously this is not the first trade between these two teams in the past.
Is it?
No, obviously not. Is it, you know, is the guy that the Ducks eventually got from the Flyers the last time these two teams made a deal? Wasn't he listed kind of as a possible center option when drafted? And then by the time he made his debut, it's no, you're left wing.
We
And that has a lot to do with McTavish is a natural center and has proven he can do it. And Leo Carlson is a natural center and has proven he can do it. There's your top six in Anaheim. So if Zegras wanted to play center, you're either getting third line minutes or you're gonna,
We're
and
playing
that
well enough to
and
bump
that's
one of
and that's
those
the weird
guys out.
and that's a little bit of the weird part, right? Because this is the deal that you hope works out for the Flyers that everybody says doesn't work out for the Flyers from the other end. Don't give up on the 24-year-old who just had a couple of rough years or whatever, because he could be great when you're finished with this product, right? And the Ducks are further along in this because Zegras could be playing on a line with McTavish and Troy Terry, or with Carlson and Cutter Gauthier, and be pieced together with these other players that have a lot of skill, be on a power play that should on paper be way better. I saw people discussing the Ducks in general as a team that they think will make the playoffs next year. I don't personally see that,
Mm.
but there's
Well,
people
that's
who
so tough.
exactly, and that's why I don't see it yet. But there's that's how high people are, I guess, on the other young talent, right? That if McTavish
Well,
stays, and well, and think about it, what does this do for the Ducks? It gives you the money to potentially spend on McTavish.
well, I mean, gives you the money. They have something like $30 million in cap space. They have an
They
absolute
They
ton.
do, but from what I came to understand was is that they're bracing themselves for more than that, because it's both. It's this year and next. Because
Yeah.
first of all, you've got to improve in some.
All their young players are coming as far
Well,
as
they don't.
contracts go.
Sure, and here's the thing: they don't have anybody who's under contract who's making more than, like, their highest contract cost wise from a cap hit standpoint is $8 million, and then you have a bunch of contracts that are falling in that 5 to 7 range that are there, but it's guys who aren't going to be in the picture for as long as these other younger guys are. Like, okay, Troy Terry at $7 million sounds great. They've talked about moving him though too. That's been rumored anyway.
Well, right, because he's what, 27 at this point,
He's
so
27.
he's not exactly a prospect anymore.
He's not, but he's exactly the kind of guy you would say you're the leader. You're the Sean Couturier, and all these other guys are coming. But you just acquired Chris Kreider, who's 34,
Yep.
and took on the full contract. You have Alex Killorn making $6.25 million, and he's 35. Ryan Strome
Yeah.
is making $5 million. He's 31. The highest paid player on the team, by the way, with one more year on the contract, is Jacob Trouba at $8 million. You're not sure. I mean, you've got $6.4 million tied up right now to a goalie who you might be moving also, because that's John Gibson. And you have the next guy in line, at least by all accounts, because Lucas Dostal got a lot of play and looked
Lucas
really good,
Dostal is very good.
but he's an
Yeah.
RFA and got a bulk of the starts last year. So what do you think he's going to want in a contract? So you've got to sign him. You've got to sign
Right.
McTavish. You've got to sign after next year, it's Carlson and Gauthier. And if Carlson continues to live up to what he started, Gauthier still, for all the stuff that everybody did in Philadelphia, because Gauthier was not playing well at the time that
Yeah,
he
that
rolled
game
through
was
in
the
January.
most fun.
Sure. Well, and by the way, I don't know. Listen, he was at this point in time, I believe he was injured, so he wasn't playing. Zegras didn't play in that game. By all accounts, if you're injured with anything, like, this would have been, he had the knee surgery. He's out because he had the knee surgery. This game was in January. He had the knee surgery in December. You don't have to, or shouldn't have to, fly cross country to be with the team while you're recovering and rehabbing at that point, certainly, because it was probably close to a month after the surgery. But he came to Philadelphia
Why is
because
that?
one of his best friends plays on the Flyers.
Two of his best friends play on the
Well,
Flyers
two,
for
yeah,
now.
that's true. Well, sure. And but really, there's a bond with Jamie Drysdale that goes way beyond whatever he's
Absolutely.
got with Cam York. And I understand that Cam York they have a tie from World Juniors and being on those US.
Cam York's the third wheel in that friendship, and it's really hilarious.
I mean, you tell me if there's any happier person about this than Jamie Drysdale. I dare you to
Oh,
find me somebody happier.
listen, Twitter was real fun on June 23rd, and a lot of it was Jamie Drysdale memes. I saw shopping for bunk beds. I saw it's so fun, and you gotta imagine that Jamie Drysdale is absolutely through the roof right now, just having a blast. And
No. So one of the things I wanted, because I brought up Drysdale as, like, look, I don't know if they use him on look, usage is usage. We won't know how Rick Tocchet wants to play this roster until it comes time. But I got to imagine that they want to see if Drysdale can man a power play. That's what
And you're
his
gonna
skill set was. And now you just brought one
you
of
can
his
put
best buddies
Zegras
to be
on
on.
that power play.
You can put Zegras on it. You can put Michkov on it. You can put Konechny on it. And all of a sudden now, doesn't that sound a
Now all they
lot
need is a
better?
center.
Well, not for the power play. You know what you need?
She needs somebody to win the faceoff so you can get possession of the puck.
Sean Couturier. Sean Couturier, go win the faceoff and stand in front of the net because you're the biggest guy on that line, on that power play unit.
Honestly, listen, if Sean Couturier can do that effectively, Sean Couturier can score 30 goals again in almost that kind of
Okay.
Wayne Simmons-y role.
I am glad you
Like,
just said that, and it has nothing to do with the Sean Couturier part, but I was thinking about this because how many guys on the roster from last year would you say had 30 goal potential if they just had a power play?
more than one.
Michkov got to 26. He
Yep.
probably gets to 30 if they have a better power play.
Yep.
Tyson Forster got to 25. You know that I don't know if he gets to 30 last year with a better power play, but you know that that's already the mark for this year, right? Like
Absolutely.
you signed him to a very friendly deal, prove it, and he's going to have to run with it now and be more than just the 25 goal guy. Down season for Travis Konechny, who has been a 30 goal scorer in the past.
Absolutely.
Down season for Owen Tippett, who has not scored 30 yet, but has come close a couple of times.
Boy, it seems like he's
Above
going to at
25.
some point. Yeah.
And Zegras has twice in his career gotten to 23 on teams that were already actively rebuilding. Exactly.
Well,
They were
and
like the early piece of the rebuild, right?
exactly. I was going to say, think about the Ducks 4 years ago.
Well, exactly.
That team was
Well, this is where I
bad.
wanted to go. Another place I wanted to go with this is that so Zegras had his rookie year, or first full season, I guess. Yeah, okay. It is technically it is
24. Yeah.
It
He
no, it is
retained rookie
technically
status.
right. So it is technically his rookie year because 75 games, 23 goals, 61 points. He was second in the Calder that year.
He was a Logan Stankoven rookie.
By the way, because I also wanted to find who he lost the Calder to. It was Mo Seider.
That's good.
And not particularly close. I mean, Seider was a 50-point defenseman in his rookie season at 20. That's why he won.
Listen,
Mo Seider had a Lane Hudson kind of year for Detroit that year and won the Calder as a result.
if Detroit wasn't an embarrassing franchise at this point in time, Mo Seider would be in the Norris conversation every single
Probably.
year.
I
He is
I
so
still,
good.
there's a lot of people who have like the stock has dropped on him too. I don't feel that way. I really like him as a player still, but
I really
conversation.
think the team is leaking around him.
Sure, conversations for another day though.
Absolutely.
So here's a story for you, and I got two stories because one is going to be a Jamie Drysdale related story, and one is going to be just a Ducks related story. But after he finishes second in the Calder, after he has that really good first full season, 61 points in 75 games. It just so happened in October of 2022 as the 22-23 season started, which, by the way, he also had 23 goals that year and jumped to 65 points. So he had a better year point-wise with a few more games played, but better year. Just so happened that October, I happened to be in California in October for a wedding and went to the Ducks home opener against the Seattle Kraken. Trevor Zegras scored the tying goal in that game on the power play. One-timer from the right circle.
Love that.
And that has nothing to do with the story per se. Like that's a good part of it. That's obviously by that point, that wasn't even what you were going to see him for. You were going to see him for a potential Michigan attempt. You were going to see him for
flip over the net.
No, by that point, he hadn't even done that yet.
Oh, he hadn't done that yet. Okay,
I don't even think he had done that yet.
His reaction to that is still one of my favorite NHL things of all time.
Wait a minute. No. You're right. He had done that by that point because 22-23 was John Tortorella's first year as Flyers head coach, and it happened while he was an analyst because they had a big on-air conversation about whether or not that kind of alley-oop pass was good for the game and all that stuff like that.
Which, by the way, hilarious that he now steps in right after Tortorella leaves.
Because it couldn't happen while Torts was here. It couldn't.
No, we've been talking about Zegras to the Flyers for at least a year, maybe 2 years at this point, as a potential target, as a guy who didn't necessarily want to be in Anaheim, as blah, blah, blah. The Flyers need skill on up front, blah, blah, blah. He's been a guy that we have looked at for 2 full years, and you know what? You keep John Tortorella employed. Zegras has 2 bad years. The price gets way, way lower. 5,000 IQ move.
So my point with this is that Zegras at this point in time, this is his second full season, home opener of his second full season. This guy's already a star. To
Absolutely.
at least to the people who are showing up in Anaheim, right? Because at that point in time, and this is how much turnover the Ducks roster has already had here. They're rolling out that year among the veterans: Kevin Shattenkirk, Adam Henrique, Jakob Silverberg, Cam Fowler, John Klingberg. Like these are guys who are no longer there, right at that point. Like, but you also had that young group that was Troy Terry was still just 25 at that point.
Mhm.
He was and the veteran of the
He was
young guys.
the grizzled vet, yeah.
But Zegras was 20. Zegras that year was 21. Drysdale's on the roster, by the way, at that point, 20. McTavish is 20. I mean, by I think this wasn't opening night or anything like that, but by the end of it, Jackson Lacombe, who's now a young defenseman who's highly talked about for them, he's 22. Like,
He's really good.
they brought even down to, at the time, the goalies on the roster when they started the year were John Gibson and Anthony Stolarz. By the end of the year, Lucas Dostal, who now is essentially the regular guy, was just coming into the picture as a 22-year-old.
Okay. Okay.
But my point with this is that of all the people, and they had, like I said, they had veterans. Cam Fowler's a good, at that point, a good long-time Ducks player. Silverberg had been there for a long time. Like, they had guys like that. The guy people were coming to see was Trevor Zegras.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And
for a bad team that wasn't selling many tickets, he was
well,
putting
even
butts in
well,
seats.
well, here's the thing though. Even then, because you've seen that over the last year anyway, you've seen that Adam Henrique can still play a
Yeah.
good solid role. You've seen that Cam Fowler can still play. This is 3 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a lot. I remember going and thinking, this is going to be fun to experience this team live, because these guys are still pretty good. Like, think about it. John Gibson was 29 going into that year, and the health was already a problem, but it was like, well, that's your goalie. That's obviously your goalie. He's in his prime. I think that was their first year having added Ryan Strome and Frank Vetrano. So it's like you took a chance on a few prime age veterans, and then you've got this cool young core that's coming up that was McTavish, Drysdale, Zegras. Like, you were getting really excited about the possibility of, they've got young guys, they've got older guys that still are effective, and they've got that prime group that's, and I didn't even bring up Troy Terry again during that, because Troy Terry was kind of towing the line between the young core and that prime age core. And they really disappointed that year record wise. And part of that has to do with guys being able to stay healthy, right? Because that was, how did the Flyers get Jamie Drysdale? Because he didn't stay on the ice. Like, you get excited about the prospect of this, but then it doesn't add up the way. The goalie gets hurt. If John Gibson keeps getting hurt, then you're down a goalie. You don't know that Lucas Dostal is that guy yet. You've got Anthony Stolarz, who still hasn't really turned the corner on his career. He's still a career
Okay,
backup.
you don't even know Anthony Stolarz is that guy yet.
Sure. So
Yeah.
So you get what I'm saying with that, where it's like, but this was the guy, and it was really cool to see. And now there's a chance that he can be the guy in another place. And the market is much more. This is the Jamie Drysdale story, as I tie it into the market thing, because when Drysdale got traded to Philadelphia, I've brought this up on the show before, and I still remember this because it was funny to me then, and it's going to be just. And I think Zegras knows a little bit better, because I think that Drysdale was so, not to say was so young, like, obviously Zegras is still 24, so it's not like he's not young,
Sure.
but it's like Drysdale came into this thing. Drysdale's already a year younger than Zegras is, and comes in at this
And
point
it was a
last year.
year and a half ago.
Right.
Right.
So he comes in at what? He was 22,
Something like that. Yeah.
like, or 20, even 21 potentially, and it's like, he shows up having known nothing other than playing in Canada and Anaheim, and walked into the locker room to do his first interview and goes, whoa. Like,
This is a whole
look at
different
all
animal.
look at all these people. This is how many people I get to talk to.
Right.
Like, okay, so I
When
just
Trevor Zegras has that in spades.
now here's the thing: Zegras is going to be more used to the media attention because he's been to all-star events, he's done things
He's
like that. So
right. He's been on the cover of an NHL video
there
game.
you
Like,
go. He's used to this a little bit, so it's not going to be as much of a culture shock, but it puts him right into that same, like now you're going to a place that should want it. And he's not that kind of player. Like he's not the old school flyer type player.
no,
But
definitely not.
he's exactly what I think you need right now because Michkov gave you that. Everybody was
You know,
excited about Michkov coming over because they don't have any skill guys like this.
you know who he reminds me of as a player a little bit?
Who?
The guy who traded for him.
You're saying Zegras and Danny Briere?
A little bit. A little bit.
Um, certainly not in size. He's bigger than that. I mean,
Of course. Of course.
and this is not to direct compare or anything like that, but I look at where him standing on like the power play. If he's if he's at the right circle, setting up for the one time or whatever, it looks like the reverse of Claude Giroux. Like Giroux is bigger than than what, or it felt a little bigger than what it said that he was listed at, but he was like 5'10".
Okay.
Like Drew wasn't huge by any stretch,
No,
like
absolutely
height
not.
wise, but he wasn't Danny Briere height either. Like it wasn't like this isn't Danny Briere, Alex DeBrincat, Cole Caulfield. This is not that.
No, no, that's true.
He's
That's true.
bigger than that, but he's also not going to overly physical you. I saw a few people suggesting that like everybody immediately wants to just throw him on. Well, he's centering the line with Michkov. That's just the way it should be.
Yeah, I've seen Shabanov, Zegras, Mishkov a
Well,
lot.
and that's there's an element where that's putting the horse before the cart a little bit because Shabanov's not
Absolutely.
done yet by any stretch. If that goes through the way that they think it will, which by this point now, if like the Shabanov thing was without Zegras at first. You just added Zegras, who clearly takes up a roster spot. I've got to imagine that if you are signing Shabanov, you are doing it with the purpose of he's going to have a spot on the roster.
Yeah.
So
So
something
I
else has
don't
got to happen.
well, and that's one of the things I was kind of alluding to a little bit when we talked about Danny and the first round picks being off the table in this deal. Y'all, I don't think Danny's done.
Not
And
in the immediate.
no, I think we are recording this on Tuesday morning, and we're both keeping an eye on social media here because I mean it's draft week and things can break any second of it, any day at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we did a show, the Flyers had 7 picks in the first 2 rounds of this draft. Now they have 6. Obviously, by the time we do our next show, the draft will be over.
Part of free agency will be over too, probably by the time we do that.
Yes, and our next show will probably be a bit of a free agency recap. We'll figure out our longer term future here moving forward, but
Mm-hmm.
over under 4.5. How many picks do the Flyers make in the first 2 rounds?
See, right
How many
now,
do they actually make in the 2025 draft?
with not much intel for anything else, because once again, and this is an important point for me to bring up before I give an answer. Once again, we did our last show. It had been less than a week. Danny Briere had spoken the week before and plays the buttoned up. We might just make all the picks. Knowing full well you're having conversations that involve your picks because
You're about
this
to
was
trade for
already being.
Trevor Zegras.
Well, I don't think, no, it wasn't that you're about to trade for, because I believe like it came together pretty heavily in the last like 24 hours. It was
That's fair.
basically
That's
Monday
fair.
morning that they really cracked down on it because I think that for most of the week leading up to, Briere's not hinting at anything. And at that given point in time, I think Anaheim was still on the first round pick. And Briere's like sitting there going, nope, that's a non-starter. Not in this trade. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up, though, is that this is another example, because I feel like this is the way that it was from the very beginning. When Danny Briere made the trade that involved Ivan Provorov in LA, and Columbus was involved in that as well. And that's where you got the pick that just moved to Anaheim, by the way. Did we know anything about it coming in? Like, everybody had a hunch that was like, yeah, Provorov might get moved, but nobody had it coming during the Stanley Cup final. It was like, yeah, around the draft. Nobody had on the table right now that, oh yeah, by the way, before the draft hits, Trevor Zegras is going to be a Flyer.
No, definitely not.
Even if it's rumored like throughout the course of the whole thing, it's nobody has it on the radar because Danny Briere is not giving you hints to anything. They don't want you. Keith Jones had said something along the lines of before also that was, once you know something, it's because it's already done. That's the reason why you're going to find something out, which is why the Shabanov thing, they might very well sign him, as the rumors indicate, right? But they are not going to tell you that it's, yeah, for sure, that's what's going to happen until it is done, ink on paper. Here's the press release. That's how they operate. And
absolutely, and
so,
we've seen it all the way back to Mishkov, right? They run a tight ship.
Well, Mishkov, I think the deal with Mishkov was twofold, right? Because there was the drafting process where you had to be very secretive about, we want to even get him into the facility.
Right, a secret meeting at the facility, right?
Which probably, to be honest, is the less careful thing that they had to do in that process, because it's okay. He was being drafted. He was already in North America for the draft. Right. That's not an issue. But the part where it's, hey, by the way, this guy's coming over from Russia and nobody knows about it until
2 years
we're picking him up at the airport, pretty much.
Yeah, that's the part I was mostly referring to. Obviously, the draft stuff too, but the secrecy with which Danny sat up there and went, we'll be ready for him whenever he comes over. And then they were at the airport like 48 hours later.
Right. Because again, June 23rd and roughly that time frame, the draft is coming up, but we're not telling you what we're doing. We have all sorts of things going on or whatever, but we're not telling you anything until it's done. Until he was off the plane, right? It's like, yeah, by the way, look at this. I'm carrying Matvei Michkov's sticks because I'm a good GM, you know, or like, you know,
Absolutely.
or whatever. Well, you know, but
well,
so to answer your question,
yeah.
Okay, your line was
4.5. My line's 4.5. They currently have 6, so they would have to trade 2 picks or more to get that number to lower.
So right now, I think they make 5. If you ask me today, Tuesday, I think as of right now, they make 5, and there's a trade involved somewhere for something that either, because I think they want to try to move up somehow or other, and we'll get into some, and I'll get into some of the reasons as we talk about some of the draft prospects, because there are guys I would move up for in a couple of different areas here. But so I just don't know yet whether or not, like, I think that the X factor here is whether or not there's a pick and play for something like this. Like, I don't know if we touched on it last week or not. It's been kind of a thing that's been bubbling under the surface for a little bit all offseason, because Buffalo is apparently looking to be a little active. And like, could I see them?
You call Kevin Adams every day if you're Danny Briere.
Well, and my point is that, listen, I don't.
JJ Peterka. JJ Peterka.
Hang on a second with that, because I kind of agree with this. I don't know if there's as much of a fit for Peterka now that you got Zegras as there was, unless you think he's playing center also. Like, Peterka was another guy used primarily on the wing, and if you're unless you're moving a winger in the deal,
which I think you probably would be.
Yes, but I think the hard part here is who's getting it done, because if your answer to who gets JJ Peterka is Owen Tippett, I don't think they're doing the deal, because I don't think they want to give up on Owen Tippett essentially less than 2 years into the contract extension that he signed, thinking that with Zegras, with Konechny maybe playing not through something right now like he was at the end of last season, with Michkov continuing to get better, I think they think there's another gear that Tippett can hit.
Not because I dislike the player, but would Bobby Brink make sense going the other way?
If that's what would get it done, I would do it. Right. My point is, I don't think that gets it done. I think Buffalo Buffalo comes in with, You want Peterka? It's going to cost you Owen Tippett.
Mm.
And not and or, but like, or the other guy who we already know they don't want to move, Tyson Forrester.
Right.
Like that's your conversation for guys like that. I just wonder if there's either a draft pick scenario or again somebody else that you feel willing to move. See, you jump straight to Peterka, and I go straight to Bowen Byram.
That's true too.
I immediately sit there and go, you want to tell me that there's okay, you got a forward who's 24 years old, who you think maybe all that needs to happen now is he's cleared of the injuries and he needs a change of scenery. Find a way for him to be able to potentially play center, find a way for him to
Let him play with his best friend again.
to just be happier about the game, potentially, because it feels like maybe that was the problem, right? That he just wasn't happy with his game or whatever. Bowen Byram just turned 24 a week and a half ago.
Yep.
And is another one of these guys. Guess what? You just acquired the 9th overall pick from the 2019 NHL Draft. Bowen Byram's the 4th overall pick from that draft. You can do the same thing you did with Jamie Drysdale, with Owen Tippett, actually, to be honest with you, too, because Owen Tippett was a 10th overall pick. Drysdale was a 6th overall pick. Feel free,
you're taking low risk, high opportunity shots on guys who
you are, but
had a lot of talent and still have a lot of talent.
And do you want to know what my answer to that is to a degree? Feel free to take a page out of the Florida Panthers playbook, but do it on the younger side. Like the Panthers made these trades and these guys were already mostly there, right? When they go get Sam Reinhart's not 24.
Right.
He's ready to play his prime years out and gave you something more than he ever gave you gave in Buffalo. Sam Bennett, same concept. Matthew Tkachuk was on the younger side when it happened, so you get even more runway.
Yep.
But you gave up big to get him, and people kind of to the point where people thought you lost the trade.
Yep.
You have convincingly won it now, but people thought, oh my goodness, Tkachuk's great, but Huberdeau after a 100-point season and Weegar,
right. It was a lot.
That's a lot. Big package. I don't know. But this is like think about it. Now that you've got Zegras like this, and to me, Zegras is like, I think Peterka's got a higher goal total already than Zegras ever did so far. That could change pretty quickly. One big season from Zegras, and that could change. I mean, you could argue the same thing with the Marco Rossi conversation. Because maybe because guys like that don't have anything attached to them like that, like injuries. Do you know of any significant injury that Rossi has had or that Peterka has had? No, like Rossi just comes in with, hey, he just played his age 23 season and he had 24 goals, 60 points. And it's been a progressive upward climb over the course of 2 full NHL seasons, not 88 games combined over the last 2. But
I also don't think you're out on Rossi.
See, I do, because I think the price tag's too high. If you were playing the game, well, sure. See, well, no, because here's another reason why I think they're out on Rossi then, because if we're to believe that Vancouver was talking 15th overall pick and that still hasn't gotten it done, they're not trading 6 to negotiate for this guy. They're not. Especially now. Well, especially now, and I guess I'm going to move this into, we're going to get into our draft stuff, because it's especially when you start to consider the way that this top 10 could break down.
It's very interesting. It's one of the more open top 10s in a draft that we've seen for kind of a while. There's a de facto number 1, but there's only really a de facto number 1 because of the team that holds number 1 and the birth location of one of the guys in that neighborhood.
I don't even agree. I don't agree with that at all.
You don't think they're taking Schaefer?
Oh no, I do think they're taking Schaefer. I thought you were referring to Higgins.
Well, I think that's what made it interesting, but I'm stunned that they're not taking Higgins, and as a little bit of a spoiler for who I think the Philadelphia Flyers should take if he's there, the answer is James Higgins.
1,000%.
I don't know if he's going to be there, and if he's not there, I would consider at that point maybe making a move. We'll get into that here, but if James Higgins is there, I think you have to take him.
Let's put it this way, and because I've been sitting on some draft like thoughts for a little while. I had them for last week's show. We didn't really want to get too deep into the draft. Here's the way I see it, because there's so many after 1 and 2. Who knows where this goes? Schaefer's going 1, Misa's going 2. See, and that's why I was confused for a second, because I thought you were referring to, you think the Islanders are still going to take James Higgins because of the hometown connection. I don't think, like,
They probably should. They're not going to.
no. They really shouldn't, honestly. If they want to play best player available in this year's draft, the pick is Schaefer. End of conversation.
Okay.
Pick Schaefer. Remember right before the lottery when we were having the conversation about what happens if, and of course, like, the Flyers drop 2 spots, not go up to 1. But if they would have gotten to 1, you need a center. Everybody knows you need a center. But I'd pick the defenseman because I wouldn't pass up the guy who's risen to that point that people think has that good of potential to be potentially at the top of your defensive core. Like, solve one of your other big issues here. It's very rare, like, extremely rare. Nobody picks goalies number 1.
Not.
Or
was
at the very
Marc-Andre
least,
Fleury the last one?
and probably might be the last one forever, because
Might be the last one ever. That's fair.
Goalies rarely go in the first round anymore, let alone at the
Yeah,
top half.
some 6'10" Czech lunatic will come around at some point that demands a team take him first overall. Like, it'll happen.
Maybe, but, like, anyway. So you're not solving a goalie issue though with the first overall pick. Typically, what a lot of teams do with the first overall pick is either get the top line center or the top pair defenseman. I'm not saying that there's not a potential future top line center in this draft, because that's a to be seen kind of thing. But if I was looking for the most sure thing I could feel like I could be promised from this draft, if I was picking first, it would have still been, I don't care how many centers are out there. If nothing else, there's so many centers. I don't know which one's going to be the right answer, but I know who the best defenseman is in this draft. Take the best defenseman.
Sir.
And this is where it gets curious, right? Because I think Mies is going to, and I think everybody else believes it. Like, to be honest with you, at this point, if your scenario plays out, I think it could throw the whole draft out of whack. If Higgins went number 1 now, after all of the talk about Schaefer and Misa being pretty much the consensus 1-2, I think it throws the whole thing out of whack, because at that point, look, maybe it's resolved by the 3rd pick, or maybe people panic and go, now I don't know what to do, because I still want, like, do you think that San Jose, sitting at the 2nd overall pick, has been sitting there thinking about Misa this whole time?
Yeah.
Or they should be. And then all of a sudden you now put them in the position to go either or. What do they want more of? Do they want the defenseman more, or do they want the center more? And then Chicago's got to do the same thing. And then,
yeah, see, I think in that case, what would happen would be Schaefer would go 2, and then Misa would slide.
But if Misa starts to slide, then I think you start to get teams going crazy calling people.
I agree. Listen, the boring thing is going to happen because it's the NHL and the Islanders have the first overall pick. So I'm certainly not expecting any fireworks here. But if they were to go not off the board, obviously Higgins is an established name, and 6 months ago was probably the first overall pick in a lot of people's heads. But if they did go a little further down the board and pick Higgins, I think the draft would get real fun real quick.
Sure. So here's how I I want to say see this, but like
what you think might happen there.
To a degree. Yeah. So if it's Schaefer, Misa 1-2, then now we get into kind of silly season with this, because it could be anybody at 3. Yeah. My gut feeling, or at least if I was picking with the 3rd pick, and especially thinking of who it is.
Yeah.
if I'm Chicago and I got Bedard 2 years ago and I got Levshinov the other last year, I think I'm looking at Porter Martone at 3. And I'm trying to put a winger with Bedard.
Okay.
Now, just as easily, I'm not going to sit there and say that it's the wrong move if they pick Hagens or Desnoyers or Frondel or you name it. I just wonder. Let's do it this way. This is the best case scenario for Flyers fans. And I don't care where it is. You can take your pick on 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah.
The best case scenario is that 1 and 2 are 1 and 2, and somewhere in the range of 3, 4, 5, Martone goes.
Well, so
And I
I was
like
gonna
Martone.
say, if you're Chicago and you're sitting there at 3, and you're thinking about that scenario that you just laid out, where you're looking to maybe get a winger for Bedard, you don't necessarily want to pick Martone at 3. If you're Danny Briere and Kyle Davidson calls you and says, or is Kyle Davidson still running things in Chicago? I don't think he is.
No, I think he is, actually. I thought you
Is
were
he?
right.
Okay. Okay. Chicago GM, I think it's Kyle Davidson, calls you as Danny Briere and says, whatever it is, give me 31, give me one of the early seconds, whatever it is, to move from 6 to 3.
Right.
You consider it? You go get whoever it is,
What was the package again? It was 6
6
and
and either 31 or one of the early seconds. If you're Danny, you start with one of the early seconds. If you're Kyle Davidson, you start with 6 and 31. Maybe you meet in the middle.
here's the thing. I think the Flyers are content at 6 or move back because they don't
Okay.
feel like they're not getting a good player at 6.
Okay.
I
I
think
didn't
like
know how much
I think the more important
additional,
I think the
like
more
getting a
important
center would matter.
I think the more important question when it comes to those other picks isn't about using it to package with 6 and try to move up a little bit, which usually doesn't happen anyway. I think it's about whether or not they have those other picks to be able to move up anywhere again in the first round, because if they do move up anywhere again in the first round, I think it's for these guys that are more likely to be targeted from from say 14 on than it is anything in
Okay.
the top 10. Like the other way that this first round really gets somewhat turned on its head is there are two centers in particular that have been rising a little bit more and more all the time. Jake O'Brien's one, Brady Martin's the other. There's been connections with Brady Martin in Utah, who picks 4th. Jake O'Brien could be anywhere in that range.
I've seen things saying that Brady Martin will not get past 4 in
Right.
Utah,
But see,
which is
to
insane.
me, and I hear you, to me, if that happens, you are guaranteed at that point to leave a Desnoyers, Hagens, Frondel on the board at 6. And that's why
Which
I'm not
is
moving.
crazy. Yeah.
I mean, listen, here's the thing. If you're left with the choice, and let's be clear, they'll have a choice. Because once you get into it, I could rattle off 5 names right now from 3 on, and you're going to have at least 2 of them on the board when the time comes. Desnoyers, Hagens, Frondel, O'Brien, and Martone. Out of those 5, 2 of them will be there for you to pick from at 6.
least 2.
If not, and Martin's kind of the other guy in that picture, right? Because basically what I just did is got you from 3 to 7, and Brady Martin's probably the 8th guy. I think
Unless he goes 4th to Utah.
Well, I'm this is my own internal kind of ranking
course,
system, is what I'm saying. He might go 4. I wonder if he doesn't go 4, if he goes 6, because, and maybe more so now that you think you've acquired a center that is more skill, less hit, and this guy's more physical. This is a power forward type, and you hope it translates, right? Like let's put it this way. I'm not completely sure just yet. Like there's comparables for all these guys, right? They do comps for everybody. The 2 most widely heard ones that I've seen, or at least the way that I feel about some of these, is that everybody says with Frondel, it's Alexander Barkov as a comp. And Brady Martin is kind of your, and this is not necessarily to translate it directly to a center, but think along the lines of what you just saw Sam Bennett do, or a Tom Wilson type. Now, I don't know if I'm throwing out, 6 for a Tom Wilson type
Mm.
when I've got a
And
Barkov
I
comp and maybe who knows what else, you know.
right, and I like Sam Bennett, but I don't even. You know what? Honestly, I'm probably pretty happy drafting Sam Bennett at 6 just because the draft is such a crapshoot. But ideally, you'd prefer to draft Sam Bennett with one of your later first round
Well,
picks.
and here's the thing: there's nothing wrong with taking that player if you really believe that at 6, that's what it's going to amount to later. What you can't afford at this point is, especially now that you've made the Zegras deal, you've made all these other deals with, you know, like you've made the deals with Forrester and Cates and established that they're part of the thing going forward. You've done this with enough guys. You can't afford to be the team that 5 to 10 years from now, however many years down the line that they redraft this thing,
Mm.
and be the team that picked the guy that they don't put in the top 10 anymore.
Yeah, see, and there's
Like, you don't want to see, and maybe you don't get the chance to do this, but let's say it's either Desnoyers or Higgins who goes 5 to Nashville, right? You don't want to be the team that picks Brady Martin, let's just say, and Frondell goes to Boston and O'Brien goes to, you know, next in, keep going in order, and then find out that the guy who went to Boston and the guy, you know what I mean? You don't want to find out later that they're and listen, sometimes it's just a fit situation. A guy who just
sometimes the teams right after you draft Miro Heiskanen and Kale McCarr. I get what you're saying.
oh, and sometimes, and what I'm saying is sometimes it's a stylistic fit that it wouldn't have worked in another city for
Right.
whatever reason. You just don't want to, especially with the possibility that, like, I keep thinking it's increasingly possible that O'Brien and Martin are top 5 picks, and Higgins and or Desnoyers are roughly there. Like,
Yeah.
I think if given the choice, they pick Desnoyers over Higgins,
Okay.
and I'm not disappointed by that in the slightest. By the way,
They get it. I personally think that James Higgins is going to end up being the best forward out of this draft when all things are said and done 10 years from now, whatever it
even over
is.
Misa.
Yeah. And I like Misa, and I think he's got a lot of potential there. I think James Hagan's game is going to translate to the NHL really, really, really well.
That part I can agree with. Like,
Yeah.
there's a world where I can see if Zegras can translate his game back to center, if you can potentially think about or not even think about adding, if Jet Lachenko can take a couple more steps in another year now that he's going to be a year older, he might even still be a year away with pro time following this season. If you really want to get technical with it, like I think Higgins is playing out this year at BC and then is going to pro somewhere after that.
Probably.
It might be, it might be one season at the AHL first, but there's always the possibility that he's that good at college this year that you just say, nope, this is an NHL player at 20 or 19.
Well, I think it also, if you're talking about the Flyers, I think it also depends on where the roster's at. How
Right.
many centers do they have, right? Obviously, you just traded one away with Poehling, who was kind of occupying that fourth line spot. There's not many in the organization, so if Higgins has a good year in college and comes out and looks strong in camp next year, there's a real chance him
It's
and Jetlachenko and Denver Barkey are all kind of fighting for some
here's
roster spots.
Well, okay, so hang on a second, because I'm glad you just brought up Barkey for a second, because I think this further fuels the idea that he ends up on wing.
I think
If
that's
if if Zegras works out, if Lachenko continues to build his game and not need to be a number one guy, if you can add another center who you think can be closer to a number one guy, and and you've got Couturier under contract, and you've got Cates under contract. Like, now it all starts to kind of become more like clear. It becomes clearer. And Barkey's best path to the NHL is stick yourself on the left wing. Especially with the abundance of right wingers they have.
and it's nice to have guys. We talked about it a little bit on our last show. It's nice to have guys on the wing who can take faceoffs, right? Just because guys get kicked out of the faceoff circle all the time. So it is nice to have, Bargy on the wing and, in the future, way down the line, or, maybe not way down the line, but
Mm-hmm.
in the future, hopefully you can shift Zegras back to the wing because your roster is deep enough. Like having these guys on the wing who can take draws, who can step in if they
Mm-hmm.
need to is nice. It's a nice skill set to have. But okay, so assuming they get one of those guys at 6, and the Flyers don't move off of 6, and they end up with one of Higgins or Martone or O'Brien or Martin, or one of these guys that are kind of circling around.
As long as they keep the pick, I think they end up with one of those guys. Absolutely.
Of course, right. Okay, then what do you think happens with the further picks?
Okay, so
22,
you want to shift
31, the seconds? Yeah, because I think it's pretty likely that they make 6. I think 6 is probably the pick that I think they're singularly most likely to step up and select.
So I'm going to really quickly, because Bob McKenzie's rankings came out, final draft rankings came out literally yesterday, and it was buried because of the fact that the Zegras trade happened.
Right.
The one thing that's talked about a lot with Bob McKenzie's draft rankings is that it is usually very industry based. It's not necessarily even his own thoughts.
This is what the scouts think.
This is what a lot of people think in general, and it's almost meant to be as close to a prediction as you can get on in terms of an order. Like, you're almost reading the rankings like a mock draft. So when McKenzie does his latest rankings, right? Schaefer's at 1, Meese is at 2. Makes total sense, right? That's exactly what a lot of people think. And now we start to get interesting because we got to figure out what the order is. So, for example, Bob McKenzie has Jake O'Brien at 6, falling in after Martone, Frondel, and Desnoyers. And then Higgins is 7 and Martin is 8. I don't see how I don't see how the Flyers don't walk away with one of those guys. If Bob McKenzie is ranking Brady Martin at 8, him going at 6 is not as much of a stretch as I want to kind of feel that it is. Not when you consider who else is going to be there. Somebody's going to be there, right? Like,
Absolutely.
you're still looking at the possibility of it. Like, if you sit there and say Jake O'Brien is available, Brady Martin's available at 6, and the other is James Higgins, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to go a little bit more crazy about, you didn't take Higgins over, just because there was a guy there who plays a really physical game, who's 6 foot 178 when Higgins is 5'10 and a half and 177. Like, what's the difference here?
A huge difference. They're going to play, and it's how you play with your size more than your size.
Like I can understand if you sat there and were faced with, like there's, I genuinely mean this. I can kind of understand if you were faced with Higgins or Frondel and you say Frondel. Frondel's 6'1", 198, and comes from a more pro-ready game because he's playing
that dude's an absolute horse. He's going to be the Alexander Barkov comp. That man's going to be a menace.
Right. So let's go down to 22, because now, and by the way, already kind of like the guy who's listed at 22. If this is meant to be a direct, like, if you were doing this like as a direct prediction, Ben Kindle is the player that Bob McKenzie has at 22.
Okay. From Calgary in the WHL.
Yeah. 5'10", 176. But what I like is 35 goals and 99 points in 65 games.
I just can't help notice his position. Center/winger. Another one.
Sure. Well, which is why to me it's a little bit more interesting to look at the names that are slightly above, because you got to start to think about this. Do you package 22 and 30? Is it 22 and 31, or is it 22 and 36, or is it 22 and 40? What is it going to take to maybe move up a handful of spots? Because
give it to me. Say the name.
Who do you think I'm going to say?
Roger McQueen. Come on.
No. See,
no.
Not that I wouldn't take him. I don't think you're getting there with it. Like, I think McQueen is taken top 15.
Okay.
And I can't find a package that I would think that they could move to get that high up from 22.
You don't think 22-31 gets that?
No, not where I think you need to get to get McQueen.
Okay.
Like, I think to get McQueen, you need to get to, like, I think to get McQueen, you need to get to 12.
Okay. Now, let's say the top 10 goes crazy and everybody shifts around and, Misa falls to 8 or something crazy.
He won't, but I
Ro-
get your point.
Rod, Rod, right. Roger McQueen's sitting there at 16,
Yeah.
17. You make the call?
Oh, at 16 or 17? Yeah, I think I do.
Assuming he has slipped a little bit, right? Yeah.
Now here's
Okay.
here's the thing. I don't know for McQueen again. It's still a risk play, and there's a big swing there. I don't know if I kind of try to be as careful as I can to not move both firsts that are left. Like
Okay.
I'm fine moving 22 and 36 for him. I really don't want to go 22 and 31.
For the record, Bob McKenzie has Roger McQueen at 9.
Like, to be honest
So
with you, you have a better shot, and I don't think these guys are slipping either, but you have a better shot from a slipping standpoint of Jackson Smith or Carter Bear falling a little lower and putting themselves in that territory. The name that I'm really eager about, though, if you're closing it up, because these, once you get here, these are really interchangeable. It could go either way, some higher, some lower. I go in this order. Cole Reshny would be an absolute ideal pick at 22. If you can move up a couple spots for him, I would do it. Jack Nesbitt, I would be very happy with.
I like Jack Nesbitt's game a lot.
There's an element where I like Braden Coots' game too.
By the way, Jack Nesbitt, true center, 6'4" and a quarter, 185.
That's what I like about him. I mean,
hello,
for sure. And those are, to me, those are three names I keep a close eye on if they're still really lingering there. Nesbitt could probably use a little bit more. And this can always tend to change in the second, like in your draft plus 1 year. Could use a little bit more point production for my liking. Like what jumps off the page with you on Reshny is 62 games, 92 points. And they're talking about him in the late teens. Like that's a guy to me that could go 14 or 15 and I would understand it.
yeah, we've heard a lot of stuff about, oh, it's a top 6 draft, blah blah blah. And as we get closer and closer,
Uh-huh.
the first round is like, oh man, there's some talent here, and maybe your top 6 or 7 is the kind of the peak, the best players out of this
Yeah.
draft. But there's a lot of talent in this first round.
So for what it's worth, and I don't know if I said this to you or not, but I'm doing it a little differently. Like usually when I do a draft preview, when I write my draft preview going into Friday for the first round, and I'm going to continue this part of it because 6th overall, you don't have a whole lot of areas where it can go, right?
You get what comes to you.
Well, and not only that, but usually there's a pretty detailed top 10 that who's roughly going to be there, and you kind of start to pick out your targets, right?
Exactly, right.
So I am doing my usual, here's 5 targets for the 6th overall pick, because it's not that hard to do.
Right.
I've already mentioned all their names already on this segment. And I'll tell you which name I left off of it because I don't think he's going to be there anyway, and I don't think he's really an option. I left Martone off of it. I basically gave you 5 centermen and said it's one of them.
I hope for the Flyers' sake that somebody else takes Martone, because if you're
right, that's what I'm saying.
Air quotes left with Martone out of that first 6 batch, I think it is a little bit disappointing.
But if you also and listen, there's a lot of time between right now and the start of the draft, and now that you've already played the Zegras card, like you've gotten that trade done. If you've got anything up in the air right now that could potentially address center, or maybe you're thinking that it's something next year. Maybe there's something next year that you're already forecasting that much. And I know
it's probably not Elias Pettersson anymore.
It's also probably not Connor McDavid, so cool your jets with that. But
listen, I know, but man, it's fun to dream.
But I'm just saying, if you think you've got a plan beyond this year that means that you can try Zegras and have Couturier, Cates, insert, Lachenko maybe is now a bigger part of the picture than he once was. Maybe it's a guy who's a little bit below, whatever the case may be. If you feel that way and think you can draft Martone if he gets to 6, maybe you just do it because it's the best player available and you worry about the center position a little later in the draft.
Yeah, and I think you're still assembling the roster as far as kind of what your post rebuild team is going to look like, and I think you're still far enough away from that process that picking the best player available is probably the correct
Sure,
decision
and
regardless.
I just think that naturally, like I think Martone's going to go way higher. Like I said, McKenzie had him at third. I think at least he goes top 5, so it takes that off the board. And I think a center is your option. It's just which one.
The draft is going to be fun this year. I'm very excited to
So
see how the top 10 shakes out.
instead of doing a 5 targets at 22, 5 targets at 31, because
Right.
it's all over the map, I just did 10 targets with the other 2. Reshny's right at the top of my list for that. Coots is on there. Kindle's on there. Nesbitt's on there. Carter Bear is on there. And again, this is interchangeable because this could be later in the draft. I wasn't so narrow-minded here to throw just forwards who play center or straight centers.
No. They're very likely looking at a goalie with one of those later
Well,
picks,
we will
even
get
talking
there.
about the early seconds.
We
But
will get
yeah,
there. I didn't narrow it for just forwards. Defensemen are an option, obviously, as well.
yeah.
Logan Hensler's one, but he might go in the teens. Cameron Reed's another. Mackenzie had him at 24, by the way. Just saying.
Yeah.
And then I threw in, and this is a name that Mackenzie ranked 33, but I
Okay.
threw in Jack Murtaugh
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
And another defenseman I threw in there was Blake Fiddler, who again I think is a little bit higher. Or no, Mackenzie had him at 28, but I've seen 22 as a realistic option. And then to your point about the goalie, I put Joshua Ravensburger on there or Ravensbergen. Sorry, I said his last name wrong. Because I see him being I can see him being an option.
So maybe not with the first round picks. Maybe this slips into one of kind of the early second territory.
Or
But they
or
but
just hear me out.
they have to be looking at Danil Prokhorov, don't they?
Oh, as a possible second, absolutely.
You can at least look at him with 31. Like maybe you don't take him. It might be a little too early,
Um,
but you got to at least consider it because there's no way that 6'5" monstrosity is going to be on the board very long.
well, let's just bring up both of these tabs then because we've already talked about 31 a little bit,
Okay.
but day 2, because it's funny you mentioned Prokhorov
Is he on
because
your list for further targets?
no, it's not that because I didn't do day 2
Okay.
yet, and I didn't really have him on the radar for one of the first round picks.
Okay.
But it's funny you say that because one, Danny Briere just spent time in Florida at a Russian, like it's at a basically a Russian showcase. And Bob McKenzie has Prokhorov ranked 36. And who has the 36th overall pick?
Crazy how that works. Bob McKenzie knows
That
this. Bob
that
McKenzie knows that Danny is assembling the
as
USSR.
as long as they have the 36th pick by the time day 2
Of
rolls
course.
around, I think that's a very realistic possibility. And
I mean, he's 6'5", 209 on his draft, like in his draft year.
here's the thing. By the time you get to, especially if you've made all 3 first round picks, by the time you get to 36, if you have picked a center at 6 and maybe a defenseman and
Maybe a
maybe a
goalie.
goalie, aren't you willing to go, sure, let's take a shot at the big winger, the big power
Absolutely, you
winger?
are. Absolutely, you are. And because that's okay. Something that we kind of have been dancing around this whole show, but you look at the Flyers roster construction, and it seems like a couple of the higher skill guys are a little on the smaller side. Obviously, Zegras isn't tiny, but we talked about the fact that he plays that little bit of a smaller, more skilled game. Mishkov is obviously not the world's biggest player. Travis Konechny is not the world's biggest player. You need some beef at some point, right? Like we
Mhm.
talked about this being Florida Panthers light, and I mentioned on last week's show that your Hathaways and your Deloriers are mentoring your Foresters and your et cetera, et ceteras. But at some point, you need guys with some beef. Yeah, but like taking a look at the Flyers roster construction, this is something we've kind of been dancing around for a little bit here, but a lot of your skilled players are on the smaller side, right? You have
Mhm.
Konechny, who's not huge. Uh, Mishkov is not the world's largest player. Even you just added Zegras. We talked about him earlier. He's not tiny, but he's not big. Like at a certain point, you do need some amount of beef, right? And this dude is 6'5", 209 in his draft year, and you're looking at options that at a certain point, like something I mentioned on last week's show, is that your Delorier and your Hathaway and all these guys are teaching the young guys how to be mean and how to play that kind of Florida Panther style that we talked about a little bit earlier. But you need guys who are big enough to actually go out there and take the beating and play that style too, right? So it'll be interesting to see kind of where the roster goes as far as if you're adding size or not. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised if the first couple picks are based around skill, of course. But then as we get a little deeper, I wonder if Danny starts taking some shots at some larger guys for some mix.
Well, and that perfect segue for me then, because I'll give you a defenseman who I think is a really good, and again, all contingent on whether they keep the pick or not. And maybe they even find a way. Like, listen, once you get into guys that are ranked beyond like 45, it's all over the place. There are guys
Oh yeah.
people rank 60 that go 48. There's people who go 67 that are ranked 45. It's all over the place. Carter Amico is a defenseman for the U.S. National Team Development Program. 6'5" and the official measurement is 6'5" and a quarter, but let's just say 6'5", 6'5", 225.
And listen, as somebody who was 6'5" at 18, he ain't done growing.
And
Very good likelihood.
I just look at somebody like that and I go, if you want size on the blue line and you want to do this by the time you reach pick, and that's why I said I don't know, rankings go everywhere. Could be 48, could be 68 if you really want to get into it. Like, that is an option to me that's it's very intriguing. That's a guy I would look at. There's an element also, like, a lot of people are pinpointing that the Flyers may just want to jump on with one of these last first round picks, with one of those other first round picks that they have, jump on the goalie situation. And really, they don't have to, because Ravensburgen is the only guy I think that could even remotely go first round.
So, and he's the guy, right? Like if somebody's going first round, it's probably
Yeah,
Ravensburger.
but like I could see them either, Jack Ivankovic is ranked 45 on Mackenzie's list. That's
He's
more of a
so
second.
small.
He is so small. There
Ivankovic
are
scares me, man.
Okay, here's the reason why I'm bringing him up, though. I don't know that the Flyers have to pick him, but somebody's going to pick Ravensburgen either late first or early second.
Wait a second. Yeah.
And that's going to jumpstart all of this. And right now, Ivankovic is the second
Second
ranked
goalie on
goalie.
the board. Yeah.
And then in order from, at least on Bob McKenzie's list, from 57 to 59, there are three more goalies,
Huh?
all ranked in a row. And I believe all of them are Russian. They don't play in Russia per se, but I believe all of them are Russian.
Interesting.
Two of them are playing on no. Two of them are not only playing in the MHL, which is the below level of the KHL, but they're both playing for the same team.
Vasilevsky, Shesterkin. Good goalies come from Russia, man.
Like, let's do it this way. Pyotr Andreyanov is ranked 58th. He's one of the goalies that was at this Russian showcase too.
Okay.
I believe I saw yesterday he just signed on or is going to sign with I think it was Cheska Moscow. I don't remember completely, but it's one of those teams, and it's like he's going to sign on until 2030.
It would be.
And the only question I have with somebody like that is, do you want to have another goalie in the pipeline who is that far away, or do you want to have a little bit more of a sure thing, which makes me want to keep an eye on Alexei Medvedev, who is the backup in London, which is a team that I know that they've seen plenty of.
Yeah, and I think right now you kind of have one of each, right? Like you have Bjarnason, who's just going to come up through the normal system and is going to be in the AHL within a couple of years here, and then you have Zavragin, who may come over at some point. So I think you can kind of do either way as far as the goalie goes. I think you're okay going best player available, because even if they are Russian and it may take a little while and all of that, just because you do have Bjarnason coming.
So this just got a little interesting, by the way, because I just saw this come through. This is a little bit of a somewhat breaking news type deal.
Okay.
The New York Rangers are transferring the 12th overall pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins
Yeah.
to satisfy the conditions of the
the
JT
JT
Miller
Miller
trade.
trade. Yeah.
But that gives Pittsburgh 11 and 12 now.
Yeah.
So, and takes the Rangers out of play, which there's
And
two in.
Kyle Dubas is going to trade down so good.
He might trade down from 12. I think
Right.
I think you keep 11, trade down from 12, because think about it. What did I just say about the 12th overall pick? Who did I put at 12?
Quinn.
And if there's teams knocking on the door that are going, hey, by the way, you just 3 days before the draft, you inherited this pick, because that's what the Rangers decided they would rather give up for the conditions.
Man, what does that say about the Rangers' look at this upcoming season out of them?
Well,
Okay, anyway.
It says they view the pick in 26 as a more valuable trade asset potentially at next year's deadline.
The Rangers might be bad again this year, kids. Buckle up.
Well, and that's the thing. At best, it's Dan Rosen just tweeted this 8 minutes ago. At best, it's an asset they can flip at the deadline. At worst, they have a first round pick in what's expected to be a strong 26 draft.
Exactly.
So and one way or the other, they'll have a pick that's right. They'll have teams calling them for that for sure.
Absolutely. It will be interesting to see kind of what the Flyers do with their picks if they do tend to keep them. So we're still sitting here, and you're still going with over 4.5 selections made, huh?
Today,
Okay.
only because. So here's the thing. I say that because right now to me, and this is food for thought, because I saw this almost over, like it was almost kind of an overnight thing, to be honest. Let me pull up exactly where, because it was retweeted into mine, just saying. But it was along lines of, okay, Zach Dooley basically writes for LAKings.com, more or less, right? Somebody on there, I guess it was there's a podcast called the Kings Men Podcast or Kings Men Podcast that would be more geared toward the Kings. The quote here is that the Kings would like to move down in round 1 of the draft. The Flyers and Sharks are teams that make sense when looking at pick inventory. Kings currently don't have a second, but would like to acquire one. The LA
They
Kings
probably don't want to trade within their division.
Well, just hang on a minute.
Yeah.
The LA Kings have the 24th overall pick.
Okay.
So if they're talking about moving back and then acquiring a second, 31 and 36 or 31 and 40, does that
40.
interest you? And if you're the Flyers and you have 22 and then can move to 24, is that where you jump and say the goalie?
Or is 22 and 24 high enough or good enough to get you back into that 13, 14, 15 range, maybe, where, a Roger McQueen might slip to?
You would think that that's possible with the pick
You would
numbers.
think.
I'm going to say no, because to me, the reason you don't even know you have 24 until almost 22 to begin with.
That's
like, that is a keep an eye on draft night when that pick rolls around, because if the Kings are serious about moving back and the Flyers look at 24 and say, we can trade 31, and think about it. What did the Flyers give up? I want to go back because I got to go back and find the exact trade, but when the Flyers drafted Travis Konechny, wasn't it like 29 and another pick for 24?
Yeah, it was like 29 and like 40 something, I think, early 40s.
Okay, so it's not out of the question that 31 and 36 or 31 and 40 can get you from 31 to 24.
I agree.
Not at all out of the question. And
I agree, especially if Rob Blake's looking to add assets as far as depth of draft picks.
Sure. So, and the reason why this comes into play is because now, sure, it could, like, I'm sitting here going, could it be a goalie? Could it also be that there's a defenseman or a forward that we just talked about that you double down on, that you go, hey, we got one of these guys at 22. We
Well,
can
right.
also
I mean,
get one of these. We can also get
you
one of
get
these guys at 24.
exactly. You get to 22, and you like two or three guys. Maybe that Kings deal becomes a little more enticing.
Like I'm willing to, for example, one way or the other, and maybe more like I'm leaning maybe this way because I think this is the type of player that could come off the board sooner because it's not as heavy on defensemen. Let's say that you say at 22, I really want to get Blake Fiddler because I don't think he's even making it to 24. But you know who I do think will make it to 24? You know, Braden Coots, let's just say.
Pick a name,
If
right?
if if that's how far it goes. You know, and there's a whole smattering of others in there that are in that range that you could just as easily say, "Hey, I like that guy." Like one of the other risers in the draft, and again, it's kind of a combo center winger pick, but I like his size and I like the potential here. Will Horkoff has risen pretty heavily in the draft. He's 6'4", almost 6'5", 190, and played at Michigan last year, had 4 goals and 10 points in 18 games. And that's early on in a college career where you have more time. And again, you're talking about a later first, not like one of these guys at the top.
Yeah, the
Could that be
expectations
a guy that
shift.
interests you? You know, or similarly, like again, if you just went verbatim off of Bob McKenzie's rankings, Ben Kindle's 22 and Cameron Reed's 24, and you could just as easily sit there and go, there's a forward and a defenseman. Is that what
Yeah,
I wanted? Do I want to get a center at the top and then get another forward and a defenseman to round out the first round and then take my chances with the goalies in the second round?
and
Now, by
all of
that
that
point, though,
is
you might only have 2 second-round picks.
well, right. I was saying all of that is assuming that they don't do something else crazy with these picks. It's. I feel like this time of year, as a fan, you are on one side or the other. You're either excited about the draft or you're excited about free agency.
Right.
Typically, right? Because your team's in one of two modes. And I am definitely more excited for the draft. Um, but if we don't have anything else on the draft, I did want to get into a little bit of free agency here.
Okay. Sure.
Um, I don't think that there is a whole lot available. As mentioned, obviously much more excited about the draft than free agency. Are there any names floating around out there that you think the Flyers could target as far as kind of significant free agents go?
What's your definition of significant?
Gonna make the roster, not
Oh,
signing a
going to
two-way deal. Like,
okay. Well, then by that logic, for restricted free agents and or for unrestricted, I mean,
yeah,
um, I see Pia Suter as an option.
yeah. I like Pew Suter. He's been around for a while. I've liked him since his draft year. I think there's a lot of talent there. Obviously, he's never really put it together consistently at the NHL level for a long stretch of time.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of talent there. I think that would be a great little low risk ad for Danny.
And it's bottom six material type stuff. You're
Yeah.
not shaking things up completely. But the reason I even put that out there or think that is, you know, okay, so semi rookie season, you know, it counts as his rookie season, but he played 55 games, 14 goals, 27 points in Chicago. Goes to Detroit on a 2-year deal. 82, you know, plays a full 82 games in his first year there, 15 goals, 36 points. Okay, a little bit better. Plays 79 games the next year, 14 goals, 24 points, so a slight step back. Signs in Vancouver, 67 games, 14 goals, 29 points in that first year. And then this past year, 81 games, 25 goals, 46 points. So all of a sudden, the stock rises. And let's just do the obvious connecting of the dots. Who is his coach for a career year? And, you know, I did this with you with Brock Besser for a second at the beginning. The fact that Besser's a winger, though, makes this complicated. Like, of course, he had his best numbers under Tocchet, but he's a winger. This is a centerman who had his best numbers under Tocchet. I think that there is a legit fit here.
You agree?
You know, and he only, you know, he's coming off a year where he had to sign low at making, you know, with a $1.6 million cap hit to go to Vancouver. I wonder if he can get back to the $3 million range that he was at before, now that he's put up 25, but not with any consistency. Like you're not giving this guy more than the Tyson Forrester contract. And if that's where this is headed, you're walking away from the table.
Another name I wanted to mention as a potential Ryan Poehling replacement. Not a long-term member of your team, but a guy to play kind of bottom six center for you for a little bit here.
Okay.
I would take Robbie Fabry on a 2 or 3 year deal.
You know what's funny that you bring that up?
Coming from Anaheim too, just should have just included him in the trade.
To a degree, exactly, but it was like it's that's really interesting to me that you say that, because I just
And again, not a guy that I'm looking at as a a future top six guy on a good team, blah blah blah. But
no, but a
he
guy
can
who had
play
his
some bottom six center. He can be a really good little role player for you.
and the point that I was going to make with this is a guy who at his best is giving you between 15 and 20 goals and 35-ish points.
Listen, if Zegras to center is an experiment, that's not a bad plan B. Just to have on your roster, just
Sure.
as an
I
extra
mean,
center.
like I don't think they're here to be big players with any of these guys. Like it just isn't that
It's not that kind of
style.
year.
It's
No.
just not that kind of year. Adam Gaudette's another one who's interesting, by the way. Another centerman in that 20, now above 25 years old, but still under 30. Had a solid little year with Ottawa. 19 goals. Didn't have much in point production. He only had 26 points, but 19 of them were goals. Again, another
I
type
could
of
see
guy
him. I could see him looking at like a Luke Cunnin, kind of in a similar ballpark.
at who?
Luke Cunnin,
Yeah, kind of in that range.
27 years old, coming off of making just under 3 in Columbus.
I think that's why I think that Gaudette is a potential option there, because he's coming off of a kind of a bet on yourself contract also. That was a $775,000 contract for a year, and you put up almost 20. It's another guy. He's another guy I think you could probably pay $2 million for a year or two.
Maybe. Yeah.
2.5, and
Yeah,
fill the Poehling role.
absolutely. And
Like,
I think Danny Briere made it clear with the Zegras move that he is ready to start making additions to the roster, right? Like this was
sure.
one of the first turn the corner moves where you're starting to make, like, you are sending futures out the door for a player who's going to help your team now and in the near future.
And I do wonder if there's a defenseman they look at as well.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
you have to think that way.
Gavrikov
See, I think
might be a little
Gavrikov's.
too high end.
I think it's gonna be too rich for them.
Yeah.
You're trying to find the guy who isn't too much of a veteran, but
You mean you don't
also
want to? You mean you don't want Eric Johnson back again?
as much fun as he was. No, I don't need Eric Johnson back. Like,
How about another Anaheim Duck here, Oliver Shillington?
it's an interesting name. Still a guy who'd be on that lower end, like third pair material. I don't know if
Of
that's
course.
like
Is that what you're looking for? Like you're not getting a number one defenseman on this market.
No, but I wonder if you're trying to find a guy who could play middle.
Okay.
Who's closer to top four. Like Henry Jokiharju is a guy who I kind of am curious about because he's 26.
Okay.
I don't think that's out of the question. Like
I don't
from an
think
age standpoint, the fact that he
Right.
was on a contract that paid him $3.1 million last year, and you still have to find out what Cam York's deal is going to look like.
Well, I think that's the biggest question as
That's the
far as the
hesitance.
defenseman goes. Right.
Because otherwise, like I just did that entire search entirely based on RFAs or on UFAs, I should say.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm paying as much attention to RFAs because I just don't know if there's anybody else you can really get heavily involved with offer sheets on now.
Do you think Zegras, for example, takes like a Velarde offer sheet off the table?
Definitely. Because
I don't know about definitely.
They have $15 million in cap space. I've got to imagine that at the very least right now, you're potentially saving upwards of 5 to 6 of that just for York. Just in case it's on the longer term side.
Probably.
Pelletier is a
Yeah, no.
non-factor. Pelletier is a non-factor, and I get that. But
Yeah.
then, but if I have to give Cam York, say 6.25 mil per year on a 3-year deal, let's just say, or 3 or 4, let's just say.
I really don't want to go 4 with Cam York, but on that number, but I get 3. Okay.
Well, because you got to balance out what the player might want.
Totally.
I'm wondering if by doing that, so now you're down under $10 million, and one of the areas you want to address is goaltending immediately, not with the guy you draft, not with these other guys who are coming up through the system.
You
And
want to
I
go
think,
get somebody now.
right, and I think you're going to, it's not that you're going to overpay but you are slightly, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny for it.
You're going to give Vitek Vanacek 7 million over 2 years or something
No,
like that.
you're not going to do that, but I don't think you're not getting a guy who helps your goaltending situation effective immediately without paying $3 million for it at least.
Okay.
This year.
And
Now that takes about what? At least a third of what you have left. And again, now are you trying to get another center in the picture? And are we talking again 2 to 3 mil on that? Now I'm running out of money immediately without moving the Ryan Ellis deal to LTIR, which they really don't want to do.
Yeah, and that's why I think
certainly if you're at 6 mil left after you do all the things I talked about, which is pretty much goalie and re-signing your 2 RFAs, if you're at like 7 mil left, I don't think that's enough for Velarde. It's not right now. It's not enough for Rossi.
I agree. No, that's fair. And I think that would probably require a move out with money moving.
Well, true. Now that doesn't factor in if you move, what is it, roughly 1.5 to 2 if you move Bobby Brink, because that's certainly a winger who I could see moved. I don't really know about anybody else specifically. Like I could easily tell you they could try to go direct replacement defensively and say they move. The problem is do you move on from Zamula just because you can move on from him from an on ice standpoint, or do you not move on from him because of the Russian factor?
Do you finally move on from Garnet Hathaway and clear up almost $2.5 million?
Not yet.
Okay.
Do you eventually? Yes. Do you do it now?
Garnet Hathaway is going to start. That name's going to start coming out.
Oh, it definitely
He's only got 2 years left.
The reason why I'm saying
a playoff player.
Exactly. The reason why I'm saying not yet is because there's going to come a time when his value is going to skyrocket. And it's not.
That is Scott Lawton premium.
And it is not with 1 full year at 2.4 left on it. Like, I think you keep Hathaway through the entire year and
do it next offseason.
And maybe next offseason. If not, even keep him into the following year and hit the trade deadline with him.
See, but the problem is, I think by that
you think by that time you're too good and you're looking to add.
Exactly, and you can't trade Garnet Hathaway because at that point you're looking at him almost as a self rental.
Well, that's why I start next offseason though, because then think about all the other things that are also off the books next offseason when you may explore that. Delorier's off the books, all of the dead cap is off the books. Now granted, do you want to keep
if Hathaway's having a good season and someone is willing to take his whole contract at the trade deadline, I think you do it.
I understand
if you're not retaining money, if you're just shipping $2.4 million into the void, especially if you're not great this year, if you're not going to be a playoff team, if you're not right, if you want to keep him for the last 20 just to keep the morale high, I understand that. But if someone's willing to take that whole contract, I think you got to consider it.
Well, and it depends on where you're at as a team. I'm not
exactly.
I don't think that, just like with Michkov, I don't think acquiring Trevor Zegras suddenly makes you a playoff team.
I agree.
But does Zegras and signing somebody else who can play down the middle and maybe adding a defenseman, and again, and these are not like earth-shattering moves I'm talking about. Like, I'm talking about literally add Suter, add another defenseman who's on the lower scale, and find a better
level guys
and find a better goalie. Think about it. Isn't this pretty much the roster that almost made the playoffs 2 years ago with just missing a goalie?
Frost and Farabee. There's definitely tweaks. There's definitely some turnover.
No, but I'm saying Frost and Farabee.
They were also bad that year.
Frost and Farabee, but Zegras is now in the picture. So you've replaced the skill a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm just saying, if you were to somehow maybe, like, if you're the team that kind of wins the sweepstakes, that is truly going to be, for of all people, Jake Allen. Does that improve? Does Allen and Ersson improve your goaltending enough that you have a better shot of being one of the last teams in the picture, because the rest of the league is not particularly great sometimes?
Are you saying that half the league sucks, Kevin?
Yes, I am, but that's my point. This is where people get that false sense of hope that you can make the playoffs. Like, I don't think they're making the playoffs based on what I think is really going to happen. I don't think they're getting Jake Allen, to be honest. I think they would like to, but I don't think they will. I'm just saying, if you were to somehow get a goalie like that to pair with Ersson, maybe add another defenseman, maybe add another center that improves your situation effective immediately, do you have enough pieces in place that you go from finishing with the fourth best odds in the lottery to
potentially making the playoffs?
To 13th?
Right.
Is that kind of a jump possible? I think it could be, with certain improvements.
Possible. Absolutely.
I mean, let's put it this way. What else are you getting? You're also going to get essentially the first year bump of a new head coach. It happens.
Exactly. I was going to say, this team's also about to have fun, because they're not going to have to run the rope 400 times in training camp. Like, they don't have to do the rope drill.
And if nothing else, doesn't Zegras bring that? If Michkov's already kind of giving you an element of fun, doesn't Zegras add to it and gives you a little bit more of an element of fun? And
by the way, we didn't really mention it a whole lot, but I cannot wait to watch Zegras and Michkov on the same ice, even if it's just on the power play, even if they're not playing a whole lot of 5-on-5 together.
Well, that's my point.
What have I been talking about Matvei Michkov since he got here? How insane and creative his passing is. Him and Zegras are going to do some special stuff.
Sure.
Like the little flip over the net. Who scored the goal? Do you remember?
From on the pass from Zegras, Sonny Milano.
Yeah. Okay, and who would you rather have, Matvei Michkov or Sonny Milano?
Oh, of course. Well, listen, I heard the clip briefly on the Steve Dangle podcast about how basically maybe those two just go out there and don't even let the puck touch the ice. They just bat it back and forth to each other.
It's going to be the Savannah Bananas on ice. It's going to be insane.
Close enough. They said Harlem Globetrotters. It's the same concept, though. It's going to be like
the modern day version, the Gen Z Harlem Globetrotters.
Well, do you want to know something funny? And this kind of ties to the Zegras thing. I'm writing the follow-up story that I did, like, to Briere's comments and taking it's a risk worth taking and all that stuff like that.
Yeah.
This isn't the news story when they actually made the trade, but I'm scrolling through for pictures, and I had completely forgotten about the time that they had him go to and I know that the All-Star game is a little hokey and people don't love it, but he goes to the All-Star game. I don't even know if he was an All-Star that year. He was just in it for the shootout competition thing.
Yeah.
And he did the dodgeball costume. Yep. Like, that type of stuff. Like, I remembered, the reason why I even brought up his personality was not even about stuff like that. It was because John Butchergross tweeted out right away the clip of, "Hey Bucci, I think I saw you at Timmy's this morning."
Hilarious.
Two Boston cream donuts, huh? Or whatever. Like
Trevor Zegras is going to thrive.
You're getting a fun one with this kid. You're getting a fun one.
That dude is going to be at every Eagles home game this fall. Like,
go search some of the stuff the Ducks. Go search some of the stuff that the Ducks had them do as well.
Oh, insane!
And there's one of them where Drysdale's in on it, by the way, as his friend, because Zegras apparently scares really easily.
Oh yeah.
So whether it's there were two of them. They put what was it? They put Kevin Shattenkirk into a box that they were doing signings, like they're signing a bunch of stuff for giveaways, charity things, whatever it may be, right? And apparently it was like, hey, yeah, by the way, there's a jersey in the box, and it's Shattenkirk's head under the table instead. There's that one, and they put him in a teddy bear at Christmas time, and they were supposed to sit down and record a holiday message, and then the bear moves on him, and Zegras has the best reaction of all of them. It's the fun. It's the fun, but you're getting this kind of personality, and it's going to be fun. And I don't know how much more they can add to this. Are there other I didn't really look at the list of free agents or possible trade guys, from a personality standpoint. Like, let's put it this way. If next offseason, again, pipe dream material, but let's say next offseason, if you're the team adding Connor McDavid, you're not exactly getting personality. You're getting business.
You're getting on ice.
You know
You're
what I
getting
mean?
big the bleep in, right bleep in now.
Sure.
Yeah, I will say the Zegers move is either the precursor to a very fun, very busy summer, or we're laying some groundwork for next season to be that big summer. But I mentioned on last week's show that something big was coming, that Danny had a storm brewing, and obviously I didn't have this, this information in particular, but I knew he was working on something, and I don't think he's done yet. And obviously he's not done because between now and our next show, he will have draft selections to make. And
Mm-hmm.
if he doesn't have draft selections to make, then we'll have some trades to talk about. So um, until then,
Well,
we
hey,
are gonna,
by the way, because it
yeah,
just came out, if you're
okay,
curious about when you might see Trevor Zegras play for the first time, not officially, obviously, not regular season, but the preseason schedule for the Flyers just dropped and it's
did it
opening.
really?
It's opening on September 21st. Their first handful of games are on the road, so they won't play a home game until September
Oh yeah, I see that.
27th. But nonetheless, there are 7 games on the preseason schedule. So, and 3 of them are at home, so there's a chance to see a few games.
Yep. So if you want to see Trevor Zegras wear the number 46 in the correct orange and black, he will get your opportunity to do so in those preseason games. Uh, the next show will be a free agency recap plus whatever trades go down plus whatever else is going on in the NHL. Beyond that, we don't exactly know what our schedule is going to look like over the summer, but we'll let you know on that next show there. Um, Between now and then, Kevin, did you have anything else for us today?
No, I'm just glad you brought up the right orange and black thing because that was a really funny callback.
It's really
Um,
funny. Jamie Drysdale and Trevor Zegras are back together again, the best
go
duo in Philly since Travis Konechny and Nolan Patrick.
go search this stuff on YouTube. I'm telling you, some of this stuff is really funny. Like Drysdale might
Yeah.
have a little bit more of a personality because Zegras is here. And I'm not. That's not a knock on Drysdale, by the way. He's just a very soft-spoken kid on his own. You got to remember this. This is the guy who they drug out onto the trip over the All-Star break right after he got traded because it was like, no, you're coming. You're coming.
Yeah, I think having his buddy here will do wonders for Jamie Drysdale.
Well,
So,
and by the way, a lot of that had to do with Cam York at the time.
yep,
That
exactly. And
York helped get him into that trade or getting him onto that trip.
presuming presuming Cam York stays, that is going to be a forceful trio in Philadelphia next year as far as locker room
I
culture
think
goes.
I think if you like, and you do this with me all the time, the percentage game. I think the
Yeah,
percentage of York staying went up a ton because of this.
it has to have. And just for the sake of the room, I think Danny Briere knew how much the loss of Scott Lawton hurt this team, and this feels like a get the vibes back on track kind of move. Uh,
By the way, quick note on those preseason games. By the way, because
yeah,
I just opened up the actual schedule and saw the times. Saturday home game at 5 and a Saturday home game at 3.
that's the preseason for you.
I love it for that being the preseason. That means no morning
That
skates.
you do, yeah. All right, so that is going to do it for us today. We will be back shortly after free agency. Free agency opens next Tuesday, July 1st. We'll have an episode at some point shortly after that with a little bit of a recap. Most of it's done by July the 6th anyway. So we'll be back at some point with a recap. If we don't talk to you, happy 4th of July. And until then, we'll see you.